7th episode of the University School of True Crime podcast. I am Jordan Heiser with my co-host
Joey Valerio
and
Tristan Jackson.
Christopher Jackson.
And we're going to be covering the Jaycee Lee Dugard case. So this is a solved case, and it is not like the normal murder cases that we've covered a lot. It's a kidnapping case that lasted about 20 years in California. So, Jaycee Lee Dugard was born on May 3rd, 1980 in Anaheim, California. She grew up with her stepdad Carl, her mom Terry, and her younger sister Shayna. Prior to the kidnapping, their family moved to South Lake Tahoe, California, 9 months before Jaycee was kidnapped. And in their eyes, it was safer than Orange County, California, where they had been living previously. So Jaycee was 11 years old at the time of the kidnapping, and she was kidnapped on June 10th, 1991 in South Lake Tahoe, California. So it was a normal day for Jaycee and her family, and she was at school, and her mom was at work. She was in 5th grade at the time, and she was concerned about an upcoming field trip. And she was worried if she could shave or not, and she was going to ask her mom if she could. While Jaycee was walking to the bus stop for school, a car pulled up next to her and cut her off, and she was halfway up the hill to the bus stop when this happened. She thought it was somebody asking for directions, but before she could say anything, she fell to the ground paralyzed. She was tased by a man named Philip Garrido, and she was unconscious from this. The car went down the hill, circled their house, and drove back up the hill to Jaycee prior to tasing her. Her stepdad, Carl, saw this and jumped on a bike and tried to chase after the car, but they got away so fast that he couldn't even see the license plate. All he knew was that it was a gray Ford. This man was not alone. He was with his wife, Nancy Garrido. She found Jaycee and helped him kidnap her as a gift for him, which... These two are really sick and twisted people, as you'll see throughout this case. So, when Jaycee woke up, she was telling them that her parents could not afford a ransom, and she was terrified. And her mom was terrified as well, as you could expect. And when she woke up, she was on the floor of this Ford, and Nancy was holding her down. The Garridos took Jaycee back to their home in, I don't know fully how to pronounce this, but Contra Costa County, California. So the first day when Jaycee was kidnapped, Philip handcuffed her, brought her into the shower, and sexually assaulted her. This was just the beginning of a pattern that happened over many, many years. Philip was doing this all the time, and he believed that he had a quote, sex addiction, and something was telling him to do this to Jaycee. So Philip and Nancy had this set up in their backyard that was a bunch of shacks, tarps, sheds, and just some other weird structures. That is where they first put Jaycee, and after that happened, they put a blanket over her and brought her out to the backyard into a shed that was soundproof. And this is where Jaycee would live. It was a very, very small shed, and it was soundproof so that she could not scream for help. Philip told her that if she did try to run, that he had attack dogs in the backyard that would get her. He would tell her that he was saving other little girls by him doing this to her, implying that he'd be a serial rapist if not for Jaycee. And he locked her in the shed with a bucket as a bathroom. And she was alone most of the time. She was constantly bribed with fast food just to trust them. And at first she had no form of entertainment, but they eventually gave her a TV. But when they gave this to her, she was not allowed to watch the news because Philip was worried that Jaycee would see herself as a missing person.
That makes sense.
And you got to keep in mind, she's 11 at this time. So him telling her that there's attack dogs, obviously, when you're older, you won't 100% believe something like that. But when you're as young as she was when this happened, you kind of believe anything that you're just fed right into your mind.
Yeah, rather than checking or at least trying to listen out for like barking and stuff.
Exactly.
Stuff like that. So yeah, that makes sense.
It's just like you can be easily tricked into thinking something like that, and I mean, at least I think Jaycee. I think she really, obviously, she believed Philip because she was so young, but I think part of this was that, you know, she was afraid.
Yeah.
Not just of these supposed attack dogs, but also of Philip and Nancy because of what they had done to her initially.
But do you think do you think he was lying about the fact that him doing this to her is saving other girls, or do you think that was just
Not
something
necessarily.
to say as well?
Well, I mean, he legitimately said that, and I think, as you'll see later on, I mean, I think genuinely it's, you know, not saying any of this was right, obviously, but I genuinely think that he was being truthful by that statement. I mean, obviously none of it should have happened because it's just sick and twisted, but, you know, I think he, in his own mind, was telling her the truth. But, you know, for as many years as she was stuck in this, it's still very, very messed up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah. So meanwhile, her mom Terry was doing everything that she could to find her daughter. She even had friends quit their jobs to help try to find Jaycee. They had many volunteers help in search, as well as put up posters of Jaycee around the country. Her hometown put pink ribbons all around since her favorite color was pink, and when she was kidnapped, she was wearing mostly pink. So Terry also founded a group called Jaycee's Hope. This group directed the search efforts and volunteer work, and they also sold cassette tapes of the song Jaycee Lee, and this song was sent to every radio station in northern Nevada. So back to the Garridos. Philip moved her into a much larger room about a month and a half after abducting her, and she was extremely scared and confused. Philip, as previously mentioned, was also crazy. He believed in different types of angels and many weird types of religion, and he also believed in demons. He would listen to voices in the wall, and he would take a bunch of drugs, dress up Jaycee in a bunch of different outfits, and do a bunch of different weird scenarios. You know, not all the scenarios that he would do were necessarily sexual. I mean, a lot of them ended that way, of sexual assault and stuff like that, but they were just flat out weird scenarios. So after Philip would do this, he would cry and apologize and say that he was a horrible person, but also would say that angels and demons told him to do it. And his wife would also apologize to her. And like I mentioned before, with Philip, you know, possibly telling the truth about, you know, Jaycee, you know, quote unquote, saving other girls.
By
There was-
doing this.
Yeah, there was footage of Philip, or Nancy filming Philip in a park playing guitar, and she would zoom in on little girls in the background. I mean, all kids, but specifically little girls. And after more time went on, Jaycee started getting stronger, and she said that she cried less, but she was still basically crying every single day. They did give her a journal, and all of her days were documented there, but Jaycee one time signed her name, and Philip tore it out of the journal so that she wouldn't necessarily know to go by her own name. Because as you see later, he kind of manipulated her to think that she was somebody else so that she wouldn't go tell the police about it and say who she was. And they also gave her kittens to bribe her, and they would tell her that cats are super expensive, so she felt grateful to be getting them, but they kept disappearing strangely, and Jaycee thought that Philip was killing them. And on April 3rd, 1994, she was 13 at the time, Philip and Nancy were watching TV and having dinner with her, and they told her that they think she's pregnant. And at this time, she was already 4 months pregnant with her first child. At 13 years old, you're 4 months pregnant with a child.
That's really bad. It's indescribable. Like, for that young of an age, and like for him to do it and just like not care, is just bizarre.
I mean, you also got to think, with her being so young, she doesn't know about pregnancy and this type of stuff.
Right.
All she knows is from commercials and shows that she's seen on TV. So she doesn't even know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
She's 13, or when she gives birth, she's 14, but she's terrified.
Yeah, and then the other fact is, I know they're both crazy, but how the wife, like, goes along with it, I mean...
Exactly. Like, she...
You know...
She isn't the one doing it all, but she's
Allowing
aiding in all of it.
Yeah.
Like, as a wife, I mean, if you want a kid, you talk to your spouse about that. You know, don't...
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
And on August 18th, 1994, Jaycee, like I said, is 14 at this time, delivered her baby with the help of Philip and Nancy. But the baby had its cord wrapped around its neck, and Philip took it off of the baby's neck and fully delivered it. She ended up having another child a couple years later when she was 17. She taught them in the backyard and set up a small school for them. They had forced Jaycee to go by a different name, and she chose Alyssa. Even worse, Nancy was so jealous of Jaycee that she had Philip tell Jaycee that the babies were going to believe that Nancy was their mother.
See, like I just said about, like, having kids, if she wanted one, she would talk to Philip.
Yeah,
about
I mean,
it.
also at this time they were... Well, actually, they would have been somewhat young at this time. Because, I mean, it obviously was, like, 30 years ago now.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, even then, they still would have been... I think they would have been kind of up there. But it still would have been possible.
Yeah, I think it could have been, but still.
But Jaycee had multiple times where she could have escaped by having encounters with other people who could have helped her. And one of these was a neighbor boy who talked to her through the fence between their yards. And she didn't say anything about escaping. And he believed that she just lived there because she was so scared of Philip. And in the 2000s, Philip started his own printing business and had Jaycee be an employee. And on the topic of escaping, she even talked to at least one customer on the phone and never said anything to them about her being captive. And like many assume that she has Stockholm Syndrome, she did not. She was just terrified of Philip and what he would have done if he caught her escaping. So Jaycee had access to an email account and to the phone, but never reached out to help from anyone. I mean, Philip just had such this mental block on Jaycee because she was so terrified of him, of everything that he's done. And at this point, it's been like 6-7 years. Obviously there's many more years to come after this, but even to this point, he's just done so much terrible stuff to her that she's just terrified. She doesn't want to try to escape because she knows he's going to do something terrible. She knows that he has the capability of doing something really bad, and she's not willing to find out what that is going to be. By 2009, investigators believe that Jaycee was moved again to a backyard, some sort of backyard in the back of their backyard. It was really weird because they had a lot of land back there. So they had they had like a separate backyard to their backyard. It was really weird.
Were they like fenced off in between, or like?
It wasn't fenced off in between, but there were the weird structures where they initially kept Jaycee, and then it seemed like kind of the theme of the structures switched in that part of the backyard. Really weird. two really, really weird people, to say the least. But Philip was on probation at one point while Jaycee was captive, and he went back to jail. 2 officers visited their home but did not check the backyard, so that's the first of bad police work in this case. But one of those times, Jaycee was in the house and talked to the parole officer, and he didn't think anything of it at all. And multiple neighbors saw her and knew of her, but did not think anything of it either. And she even answered the door for neighbors. And law enforcement had a record of Philip kidnapping someone in 1979. So that's...
So they never stopped to think,
Yeah, like...
They never found the child that he kidnapped.
Or if they did, he still was on record for kidnapping somebody. Right. So, like... I mean, obviously that was quite a few years before this case happened, but still, do you not see a pattern with this guy?
Yeah.
He was on probation while having Jaycee kidnapped. He went back to jail for violating probation, and he kidnapped somebody previously before this case even happened. Like,
right. I mean, it adds up to a lot of things that they should have anticipated.
Exactly. And, like, I've seen video of one of the parole officers in there.
Mm-hmm.
And he just didn't do a thorough check at all. He just kind of, like, walked through different rooms. He, like, didn't look behind stuff, didn't look through stuff. It was like he just kind of went and looked into the room and said that it was fine.
That's a very, like, yeah, something with a lot of these cases, they all have this in common, is that the police work is always very shoddy. You know?
It's just very bad.
It's like they never really seem to put any effort into solving these cases. And it like they literally had an opportunity to end this case well before it did.
Exactly.
Well before they figured it out. And they never took advantage of that.
Like, it added what? Like, probably around 8 years under her being captive.
That's true.
I mean, you could say, like, oh, they didn't know. You have someone who's on record having been convicted for kidnapping.
And you're not going to suspect anything when he violates parole again.
Yeah.
Now, I don't fully remember what he was on probation for, but he violated it again.
Right.
And you're just going to take this as, go and get him and not actually inspect the house.
And besides,
like,
why, if they know there's a shed in the backyard and they're searching for things,
why not check the backyard?
You should automatically check a shed. It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, granted, there were many sheds back there, but
still, I feel like people are far more likely to hide stuff in a shed than they are in their own home.
Exactly. Like, especially when you have that much land back there.
Right.
And you have so many different weird structures.
Right.
Like, why doesn't it go through your head that somebody who's been convicted of kidnapping before might, have something or somebody stored back there?
Right.
Like, it doesn't make sense to me what was going through these officers' minds.
Right.
And on the similarities of, Jaycee having chances to escape, in April of 92, a man saw Jaycee in a gas station looking intently at a picture of herself, and he reported it to the police. And obviously nothing came of it. And in 2006, a woman called the police and reported strange tents in the Garrido's backyard and children who seemed to be living there. And the police never did anything about it.
So they said that they got a call saying they saw it?
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
And they did nothing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty good assumption, or summary.
That's... Wow.
The first one was not as, suspecting.
Yeah.
It's still bad that the police did nothing about it, but the second one for it to be at their house and him already being, suspected of breaking parole and already having claims of doing kidnapping and prior to this very large one is very like it's just undermining the fact that they don't really. As soon as it gets to a certain amount of time between when it first started and when it's happening still, they don't really pay attention to it as much as more recent cases.
It's very shocking that they you get a call, you're a police officer, you get a call at the station saying, hey, I think my neighbor has kids in his backyard. And
is it
like,
known to have
cool.
children of his own?
And you're like, oh, cool. Clink.
How are you not going to suspect anything of that?
At least not come and check the tents at all.
Right.
Exactly.
Not even send anybody out to, even drive past the house.
Exactly. And I mean, like I said earlier, Philip is crazy. He believes in, his own type of religion. That he hears voices in the wall and that he listens to a bunch of different angels and demons battling back and forth. And on August 24th, 2009, Jaycee, her two daughters, Nancy and Philip, went to the USC Berkeley campus so that Philip could run around screaming about his religion on the campus. 2 Berkeley police officers noticed Philip and the girls that were standing with him. And Jaycee was not acting like she was kidnapped, not mouthing help to anyone, and neither were her 2 daughters, and they weren't planning to go anywhere. These 2 female police officers felt like something was off, and that kind of goes along with, trust your gut instinct.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people go against their gut instinct, and, they wish they went with it later on, or at least in retrospect, and that, I think, is where these 2 officers went right and all of the other ones went wrong.
Right.
Is these 2 followed their gut instinct and felt that something was off, and so they talked to Philip for a while and tried to convince him that they were interested in his religion, asked for his name, and looked up his record. After they saw his record that I previously stated, they took them all to the police station. At first, Jaycee was not cooperating, was not talking to police, and kept telling them that her name was Alyssa, she chose and Philip told her to go by. After a while, she finally broke and told them her name by writing it down because she was afraid to say it out loud because she hadn't said it in 18 years.
Yeah.
She was in captivity for, like I just said, 18 years, and her daughters were 11 and 15 at the time that she got freed. They asked her if she wanted to call her mom, and obviously she said yes. And her mom was at work when she got this call, so Jaycee had to wait for her mom to get there. They arrested Philip and Nancy, and then Jaycee was reunited with her mother. So now Jaycee is an author. She's raising her 2 daughters and is still getting therapy from this, as you could expect. She's been free for over 10 years now, and she was also awarded $20 million by the state of California because of the parole officers not finding her. Philip and Nancy will be in jail for the rest of their lives. Philip was sentenced to 431 years in prison as part of a plea deal. Plea deals lessen your sentence.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
it's
if
not
that
like he
tells
doesn't
you
deserve
how much he would have gotten without a plea deal,
it.
if he had just gone down guilty while maintaining his innocence, I mean, obviously, there's no chance he could have maintained innocence, but
That's
if he had claimed he was innocent and he didn't do anything wrong, and that Nancy was the one to do all of it, he would be probably upwards of 500 years, 600 years.
Yeah.
I mean, for a good reason.
Obviously for a good
I think
reason.
They shouldn't have even given him that. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
people like this do not deserve.
exactly.
good
You got to
treatment.
take into account he kidnapped her.
Right.
He sexually assaulted her. He had 2 kids with her. And he kept her in the backyard for most of the time that he had her kidnapped.
Right.
And he also said that her kids were going to be believing that Nancy was their mother.
I may have missed it again, but how many years did Nancy get?
I didn't get there yet, but
Oh.
Nancy was sentenced to 36 years to life after pleading guilty. I think the reason why they didn't give Nancy that high of a number, obviously she got 36 to life, which is essentially the same
Life,
thing Philip got. But the reason why hers wasn't, such a profound number was because she aided in the kidnapping, but she obviously wasn't the one that, did
She
all of
didn't do
this
anything
stuff.
outside of the kidnapping.
Yeah, yes, she kidnapped her and kept her captive and stuff like that, but obviously Philip should have gotten more because he had 2 kids with at the time when she was kidnapped, 11-year-old girl.
Yeah, and
she was 14 when she had her first child, 17 when she had her second.
Right.
Both times she's a minor.
She's a minor both times, and she was kidnapped. So, it makes sense why he got so much time.
And that's just 2 of the times that it happened that resulted in
Exactly,
a
that
child
we
being
know
born.
of.
That's 2 of many, for sure. And
Alright.
so
these 2 were just so sick individuals.
yeah.
You kidnap an 11-year-old on her way to a bus stop to go to school.
Right.
And then you keep her captive for 18 years.
Yeah, that's
Just think about it. That's about as long as us 3 have been alive.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
If you just think about it, our entire lives, that amount of time is how long she was in captivity.
Yeah. She's in captivity longer than I've been alive.
Yeah,
Longer than any
yeah,
of us
so-
have been alive.
Longer than any
actually.
of us are even alive. It's just... That's just so hard to fathom that,
Yeah.
she had so many chances to escape, but Philip brainwashed her so much to believe that, he was going to do something terrible to her.
Yeah.
That she didn't have the courage to run away.
The psychological.
Even when she had chances.
But also, like you said earlier, she was a kid, so the
Yeah.
brainwashing was as easier than as if she was,
18 years later.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or even not even 18, like.
Well, yeah, even
say
if she,
like
if
five,
she was
5 year-
18.
yeah, like say even like 5 years later, like she's 16 years old, she's going through the maturing stages of puberty and stuff like that. She has the common sense to take the opportunity to run away if she sees the opportunity. But as an 11-year-old, you're not even in middle school, I'll say, at that. Also, you're still just you're learning basic stuff in life, so you're not really thinking about, oh, if I get the opportunity, I'll have the chance to escape, even if it's the clearest window possible.
I mean, it's just hard to even wrap my mind around what she had to have gone through.
Yeah.
Yes, she's written books about, all of her time there, and she's been on interviews, but that doesn't... And them awarding her $20 million for the parole officers, that doesn't make up for having 2 kids with your captor.
I wouldn't even say just the 2 kids.
Well,
18 years.
Yeah, 18 years. That's what I was getting to. 18 years and being forced to have 2 kids with somebody that kidnapped you.
$20 million in a couple books does not do justice
Exactly.
to serve what she went through.
Yeah.
That's just...
I don't even think $20 million is enough, justifiably.
I think for one parole officer, maybe it's enough.
But for the state government,
Right.
one is the state government, $20 million. It's a hefty toll, but it's not enough. It's not hurting them financially, anyways. 1, 2, it's California, so it's a big state anyway.
Yeah.
And then 3, if it was just one parole officer, possibly, but for them to have multiple calls and multiple visions of oh, she was at the gas station. Why aren't you guys coming out here?
Right.
Immediately, say somebody's close in the vicinity. Why aren't you at least coming to check in, see what if the guy was lying or not, see if he was just a missed call, anything like that. See how she's getting home, because obviously, one, she was there by herself.
And then she was with Philip.
She was with Philip? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But still, identifying the man, because And
Because like those two Berkeley
yeah.
officers did is they identified him and
Right.
actually figured it out.
Yeah, and like they didn't. It's not like he walked to the gas station knowing him. He obviously drove with probably the car.
I would assume he
had.
drove the car that
Yeah,
he was
had,
in when
she
he kidnapped
her
her.
in general. So at least take down the plate, something like that. So like, just the smaller things that can help with the case, really.
Like, as a police officer, I feel like you have a certain responsibility to, anytime you have even the slightest suspicion about a person, you should check. And that just wasn't done.
Not even just like as a police officer though, like there.
I mean, as a
detectives.
citizen,
Yeah.
like so many different people had chances to get her out of the situation if they had, recognized that something was wrong. Obviously, she wasn't going out there reaching out for help. But like, if you don't know this guy to have kids, like the person that
Right.
called the police, why don't
Why don't you get investigated? yourself?
and if you don't realize, if you notice that people didn't come out to the scene, why don't you call again? Like, it doesn't make sense to me that, obviously part of the reason why this entire podcast exists is because of bad police work.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, there's cases down the line that, there was good police work and it was all, cut and dry, done.
Right.
But like this case could have been like some of those later ones that we're gonna cover.
Right.
It could have been done early.
Right,
It could have been over.
Yeah.
It would have been very easy to solve this case
If
it
people had
been-
actually just taken
yeah.
the time
If people had taken initiative.
to actually go and investigate more.
Right.
I mean, that's even similar to the Amanda Knox case.
Yeah.
Like, if they had just taken the time to investigate a little bit more and taken more precautions and done all these little things, it would have made a huge difference.
Right.
Right.
Like, Jaycee could have been out of there probably a few years down the line.
Right.
She wouldn't have had to be there for 18 years if people had just taken...
She wouldn't have gotten to the second trial. Maybe not even the first.
Exactly.
So.
Right.
Like, yes, the first one was, 3 years
Right.
after she was kidnapped, but
The second one was 4 years later.
when they
Right.
initially reported it, her dad told the police what kind of car it was. You'd think they would be looking for a gray Ford.
Yeah.
They didn't do that at all. Like, yes, he
Yeah.
couldn't get a plate, so there could be multiple gray Fords.
Right.
But each car has its own tire print. I am sure they left some sort of tire print, considering they had to speed off.
Right.
I guarantee you there was some sort of tire mark. You take that, mixed with the fact that he gave you a gray Ford, and you go find how many people around, 150, 200 mile radius have that exact gray Ford, that exact year, make, model, whatever.
Right.
I guarantee you it is not as many as you would think it would be.
Right. I mean, overall, just it's kind of sad to see that, to see how little effort was and how little initiative was taken, and it's sad to think about how she paid the price for it, and it's, yeah.
I mean, I think the good part in this case, not that there's many, but Philip and Nancy are going to be in jail until they both
Yeah.
die. Like,
That is-
they're not gonna be free like Jaycee is right now.
Yeah, that is.
They're
the one thing
gonna
that-
feel what Jaycee felt for 18 years.
Yeah.
but
they're gonna be
feel that for the rest of their
Exactly.
lives.
They're gonna feel that for the rest of their lives.
So-
So, man.
So that concludes the 7th episode of the University School of True Crime podcast.